Won't let me in. Okay.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. My name is Nikki Edel. I'm with AAUW of Michigan, AAUW Plymouth Canton, and it's with great pleasure that I welcome you to another Women's Equality Day gathering. This year, our hope was for an in-person interaction once again to share hugs, handshakes, and conversation face-to-face. However, we look forward to that in 2022. We did not have an event last year, so it is with optimal enthusiasm that we celebrate the 101st anniversary of the passage of the 19th Amendment. I would like to thank all of our sponsoring organizations. Special gratitude is offered to AAUW of Michigan, AAUW of Michigan President Jan Van Gass and Sheila Blair, President-elect, who has been our technical genius and guru, thank goodness, and also to ERA America and Laura Callow. I would also like to recognize a few of our special guests. Robin Daniels, who is regional representative for Senator Gary Peters, Representative Julie Rogers, Representative Mary Cavanaugh, Representative Cynthia Johnson, and U.S. Congresswoman Debbie Dingell. Thank all of you for attending, and thank you for your commitment to equality. Let us for a moment recall the sagacious efforts of our foremothers that won us a hard-won privilege after many years of struggle, pain, endurance, and adversity, including police brutality and physical abuse. We are well aware of the strides that have been made over the years, but we are acutely alert to the barriers that continue to exist to full equality. It's appalling that we still do not live in a society with equal pay, without sexual assault in the workplace, on campuses, and in people's homes, where women have the right to make decisions about their bodies and reproductive health, where paid sick leave and a living wage are no longer an issue, and in a world where the ERA has finally been passed. In addition to honoring our foremothers, we will also be addressing the passage of the Equal Rights Amendment. In 1923, Alice Paul, one of the most prominent women's activists of the 20th century rights movement, introduced the ERA. Equality of rights under the law should not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of sex. It is appalling, again, that almost 100 years later, the 28th Amendment has not been cemented into our Constitution. There should be nothing complicated about equality. And yet over the years, there have been so many impediments to achieving this goal. We will also pay homage to three of our Michigan foremothers later in the program, but I would like to pay tribute to some present Michigan women that for the last 18 months have led the state with fortitude and tenacity in the face of adversity and multiple barriers. Thank you, Governor Gretchen Whitmer, Attorney General Dana Nessel, Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson, and a number of our female legislators, including Representative Donna Lasinski, our House Democratic leader who is with us today. In 2022, we can only hope that we will be celebrating once again, not only the passage of the 19th Amendment, but also the passage of the ERA. In closing, I will reiterate the words of Alice Paul almost 100 years ago. Mr. President, how long must women wait to get their liberty? Let us have the rights we deserve. So now I'm really honored to have with us today, as I said, Representative Donna Lasinski, Michigan House Democratic leader, and she's serving her third term in the Michigan State House of Representatives. She's passionate about building strong communities rooted in strong schools. Leader Lasinski is a member of the Michigan Progressive Women's Caucus and the third woman to serve as the leader of the Michigan House of Democrats. We are so happy to have our voice in her voice in our midst. Thank you, Donna, for joining us. She will share some words with us, and then she will be open for questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Mickey. It's so good to see your face. It's been way too long since we've been together, and I look forward to us holding our pay equality days and continuing to work on that legislation. You know, as we reflect on 101 years since women gained the right to vote, And we reflect on how we have worked so hard since then so every woman could vote. We know that it took the civil rights movement in the 60s to really have our brothers and sisters of color be able to have equal access to the polls. And we know we're still fighting that every day right now. And we cannot let those challenges to our right to vote go unanswered and unchallenged. We cannot move backwards. We have seen over the last year unprecedented challenges to our democracy. We have seen unprecedented challenges to women in the workforce as the pandemic has struck women much harder than it has struck men in the workforce and in the return to work. Women's Equality Day is important for us to celebrate every year, to look with a cold, clear eye at how far we've come, what our challenges are, and what our obstacles are ahead. It is a grave disappointment to me that we have not been able to pass the Equal Rights Amendment. Michigan did its job decades ago, but we need to ensure that everyone across the nation moves this right forward. Without the Equal Rights Amendment, we continue to have to argue in courts around legal distinctions between men and women for property, work environment rights, and others. And it's simply unacceptable. It's the responsibility of each of us to continue to keep a focus on these efforts to make sure that women's rights are human rights. I'm extremely proud on the House Democratic Caucus side to lead the first Democratic caucus that is majority female. Of our 52 members, Democratic members in the House, 27 are women. When we look across the aisle, we only see 10 or 12. There's a distinct disparity between female representation in the Republican and the Democratic parties, and we must work to achieve parity across the board in the Michigan State House, Senate, and in our congressional and US Senate ranks. Our caucus is also unique as being a caucus of historic diversity. 25 of our 52 members identify as Black or Brown. And what that means is when we come to problem solving, when we come together across every aspect of our diversity, we come up with better solutions for Michiganders and for our families and for our businesses. We know that women and our economic potential is one of the greatest untapped economic engines in the United States and across the globe. There are billions of dollars left on the table when women don't have equal access to the workforce, to the things that we need to move women forward, equal access to childcare assistance, quality care for our children. We know that all of this matters. Transportation, everything is a building block to build the economic power of our state and our nation. And so as we look at the challenges that are here today that we're facing, particularly in the pandemic, in working to expand the opportunity for women while we're fighting against some regressive economic action that women are enduring right now during the pandemic. We need to make sure that education plays a part in it. We need to make sure that affordable education plays a part in it. And we need to make sure childcare assistance is there. And so with that, I'd just like to open it up for a question or two. I'm up in Lansing about 4 days a week right now. I threw up the Capitol Dome as a background behind me today, just to remind us all that women are in the seats of power in Lansing. We are there. And all of us talking and working together, sharing openly and frankly the challenges that we face is what allows us to build policy solutions that work for the state, that work for women, and that work for our future. So I'd love to hear if there's any questions. And as I would be remiss if I didn't say, I'm always honored to be here with my colleagues and particularly honored to be here with U.S. Representative Debbie Dingell today.
We do have a question in the chat for you. What are the big issues for the state government budget that differentiate the Democratic approach from the Republican approach?
So thank you for that question. One is something you've heard all of us, you've heard the Progressive Women's Caucus talking about. One is the disbursement of federal dollars. We have seen that the Republicans have been very resistant to dispersing the federal funds that are available to us for childcare and childcare assistance. That's critical to us getting women back to work, particularly in the time of uncertainty around schools and education. With second factor that we're seeing right now is a big disagreement around future for frontliners. And this is a program where folks who have been on the front lines, and a lot of those were women in grocery stores, in nursing homes and other places, working the front lines during the pandemic, have the opportunity to return to college at no cost. We see that that was rejected by our colleagues across the aisle. We know that folks need to have the opportunity to seek that higher paying, more stable job. And there's absolutely a role for us to play in policy. I would say the third big item on that stool when we're thinking through the lens of female equality and economic opportunity is equal pay for equal work. We have a number of our colleagues, both male and female, who do not believe that there is a disparity between pay for women and pay for men. We know unequivocally that it exists, and that there are policy solutions. I've been so proud to be a part in all of my sessions of the pay equality packages, creative, innovative solutions that we've put together to equalize pay. I would say those are three very big areas that impact women and that impact Michiganders.
Thank you. I have another question for you. What are the worst ideas in the various voter suppression bills?
So the worst ideas. I was so proud to stand with my colleagues from Texas and Washington, D.C. 2 weeks ago, along with a number of senators, Cory Booker, Senator Kristen Sinema, and to speak to these issues on a national stage. What we see is putting limits around absentee balloting, putting verification ID, photo ID, and other signature verification limits that are stricter than what we have today in a system that works, that is safe and secure, and that are intended to make it possible so that it's not all of the people who can vote all of the time, but some people who get to vote sometime. When we take our package of the 39 bill package being promoted through our Senate here in Michigan and compare it to the package that passed in Georgia, our package here in Michigan is more restrictive than the Georgia package. There's several items around registering to vote, removing folks from voting rolls. Here's the thing. We are not engaging in debating the merits of their package because the package is across the board, restricts the freedom to vote. And so what I want us to keep our eye on is in Michigan here, we passed Proposal 3. We passed the ability to have no reason absentee voting, to have same day registration. We are fighting to do what's right and what the people of Michigan overwhelmingly supported at the ballot box just under 2 years ago.
Donna, thank you so much. We appreciate and honor your outstanding leadership in this state. Your fortitude during these past months has been an inspiring example to all of us. And we know you will forge ahead with diligence. And I look forward to seeing you in the near future. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mickey.
Well, now we will present Helen Milliken, First Lady of Michigan, portrayed by Helene Lusa, AAUW, Plymouth, Canton. Mrs. Milliken. I don't know why that's there.
I was born Helen Wallbank on December 4, 1922 in Colorado. I was the second of 4 children born to Stanley and Nellie Wallbank. My family was conservative and my father, Stanley, was a lawyer in the Denver area. I attended a girls' school in Denver and then enrolled in Smith College in Northampton, Massachusetts after high school. There I earned my bachelor's degree in 1945. In 1943, after my freshman year, I met Bill Milliken, who was a student at Yale, which is only about 80 miles from Smith College. At the time, he was stationed at Lowry Field's Aerial Gunner School for training in the Army Air Corps. We were finally married in October 1945 after delaying our wedding 6 times due to his military commitments during the war. Although we had planned to move to Ann Arbor so Bill could attend the University of Michigan, we moved to Traverse City because Bill's father was ill. During our marriage, we were blessed with 2 children, William Jr. and Elaine, and I dutifully played the role of supportive wife. I raised the children while Bill worked for the family business, the now defunct Milliken's department store. I first entered the political arena when my husband was elected a state senator in 1960. He was then elected as Lieutenant Governor of Michigan, serving under Governor George Romney. Then Bill succeeded to the position of Governor of Michigan in 1969, when Romney resigned to become United States Secretary of Housing and Urban Development. For 14 years, I served as First Lady, the longest tenure of any First Lady in state history. As Bill became more involved in the political arena, I began to evolve into an outspoken advocate of issues close to my heart. Perhaps one could call this the evolution of Helen Milliken, as I became a political force in my own right. When we initially moved to Lansing, I became a champion for the arts, supporting the Michigan Council for the Arts and the Michigan Art Train, which is a mobile art museum. I became a proponent of women's rights and also environmentalism. I became one of Michigan's leading supporters of the Equal Rights Amendment. It had been passed by the United States Congress in 1972 and was ratified by 35 states, including Michigan, in the following years. After Ellie Peterson and Liz Carpenter stepped down, I became one of the co-chairpersons of ERA America. Ellie, a groundbreaker and pioneer, was certainly a guide to me. Along the way, she gathered scores of young women to mentor in the political process. She also gave us a belief in ourselves, one of the many gifts with love and irrepressible humor. No wonder so many people called her mother. In 1980, when the Republican National Convention was held in Detroit, language supporting the ERA was removed from the convention platform. Even though my husband was inside participating, I boycotted the opening ceremony to attend a pro-ERA protest. In 1982, when Headley was running for governor, he made it clear that he opposed the ERA. I warned in September that activists, Republican women could desert their party in November. Those of us who worked so hard in Michigan for the ERA were not suddenly going to walk away from those issues and vote against them. Women were going to vote their consciences. In 1994, Democratic Michigan gubernatorial candidate nominee Howard Wolpe asked me to be his running mate for lieutenant governor. I declined this offer, and then he chose State Senator Debbie Stabenow. Over the years, I was committed to a number of other organizations, including sitting on the board of the Women's Research and Education Institute of the Congresswomen's Caucus, the League of Women Voters, Federation for American Immigration Reform, Zero Population Growth, and the Federated Garden Clubs of Michigan. I was also a convener of the International Women's Year delegation in Michigan and was a delegate to the 1977 IWY conference in Houston. It has been said that I was independent, committed, and principled. I never sought, but never shrank from controversy. When my commitment to equality conflicted with my political loyalties, I chose the former. I was privileged to fight for women's equity and passage of the ERA. Kudos to all of you who have continued this fight. Forge ahead, for failure is not an option. The time is now.
Thank you so much for joining us, Mrs. Milliken. As always, I am privileged to introduce Laura Callow, who will give her annual ERA commentary. Laura has often been referred to as the Susan B. Anthony of Michigan. She has worked year after year on the ratification of the ERA at both the national and state levels. Her commitment to this effort and her additional talents have garnered her multiple accolades, including being inducted into the Michigan Women's Hall of Fame. Laura?
Laura, you're muted.
All right, I'll I'll start over. Oh, good afternoon. In past years, my speech has been an ERA update. This year, our main speaker, Eileen Davis, will provide that information, and my speech will describe Michigan's role in the historic struggle and the efforts going into defending our state's ratification of the Equal Rights Amendment. Michigan was number 17 of the first 22 states to ratify the ERA in 1972. This was a heady time, and we mistakenly thought the ERA was a sure thing, and all we had to do was wait for the remaining states to ratify. Thus, proponents were taken by surprise and unprepared when Stop ERA took root and launched the first of 3 attempts to rescind Michigan's ratification 4 years later. Clearly, there was a need to organize. Michigan's First Lady, Helen Milliken, a Republican, convened a meeting with the heads of ERA supporting organizations in April of 1976. It was chaired by Ellie Peterson, the first woman to head a major political party here in Michigan. Peterson had just been appointed Republican co-chair of a national coalition called ER America. Our group formed a state branch called Michigan ER America. The purpose was to preserve Michigan's ratification of the ERA, educate the public on the benefits of constitutional equality, and help fund ratification efforts in non-ratified states. Through the generosity of many of you who are watching, we have, through the years, given thousands of dollars to ratification drives. I was elected co-chair of Michigan ER America and began reading Stop ERA literature. I was appalled at the misinformation and the outright lies they were publishing. In addition to giving speeches on the ERA, I became a truth seeker. This was not easy because we did not have the internet, and one anti-ERA claim took 6 months to debunk. However, I am pleased to report that I had an opportunity to confront Phyllis Schlafly herself on one falsehood. She was appearing on a phone-in radio show in the Detroit area. I called in and after being connected, pointed out that there were no more women-only alimony laws because all states had changed their laws to read either party. Schlafly had just received her law degree, so was sort of going along with me saying, Well, I then asked why Stop ERA was claiming the ERA would cause women to lose their right to alimony. That's a lie, I said. Why are you printing that lie? Schlafly sputtered momentarily and then recouped and told me that she wasn't responsible for what Stop ERA printed here in Michigan. And of course, that's a lie too. How to control the antis was one of the first orders of business that Michigan ER America considered. It was decided that we should refuse to debate and therefore deny the antis a public platform whenever possible. Our Attorney General, Frank Kelly, told us that the ERA could not be rescinded. Therefore, there was no reason to debate. Unexpectedly, a state representative either did not get the message or did not think it applied to her because she agreed to debate the chairman, her word, of Michigan Stop ERA. I was horrified. I knew this debate had to be stopped for 2 reasons. First, it was impossible to prepare for a debate because the antis regularly cited some incident they claimed occurred in a state with a state ERA. And of course, with research, we would much later learn that the incident cited was totally false or not as they claimed. Second, the debate was to be moderated by J.P. McCarthy. Many of you will remember that J.P. was a mega radio star on WJR, a megawatt radio station. Everybody in the Great Lakes region knew J.P. I couldn't bear the thought of a state representative possibly being made to look foolish in front of this media giant. Therefore, I contacted the woman in charge of the debate. I mistakenly thought her organization was part of our coalition. It wasn't. I tried to reason with her, but it soon became clear I could not persuade her. At that point, I decided that we would have to get a delegation of ERA supporting proponents there to give moral support to the state rep. Mentally, I began thinking, who in AAUW, BPW, the League, NOW, Coalition of Labor Union Women, who might be available on a weekday morning around 10 a.m. As we were about to end our conversation, I thought out loud and said with a sigh, I guess we're just going to have to call out the troops. Well, 2 days later, to my complete surprise, I learned the debate had been canceled. Now, I have no idea what sort of fearsome feminist females she thought ERA supporters were, or what dastardly action she thought we were going to take. I just know that I have never felt so powerful, either before or since. It was impossible to deny the antis a platform totally, especially when high school social studies and government teachers requested us to make a presentation. I did not appear with the anti. Instead, as a proponent, I presented reasons for the amendment to a class one day, and the chairman of Stop ERA would appear the next. Since I was the pro, I always went first. Therefore, I tried to set her up whenever I could. For example, I knew that in speeches, she would claim to be quoting the ERA, but she was really misquoting because she omitted the words under the law. For the first class we spoke to, I wrote the complete text of the amendment on the board and underlined those 3 words. I told the class to just listen to what she said. They did listen. She misquoted, and those teenagers let her know. The teacher said he felt sorry for her. I don't, but I never heard her misquote the amendment after that. I informed the student during this period, the U.S. Department of Education issued a ruling saying schools could no longer hold a father-son or mother-daughter banquets. The antis had a field day with this. According to them, this was an example of all the awful things that would happen if with the ERA. I informed the students that this was not a silly ruling. Instead, it was an attempt to be kind, because at that time, 17% of American students lived in single-parent families. Thus, there were thousands of boys without fathers and girls without mothers. And holding banquets that were called mother or father specifically excluded students with only one parent and was very hurtful. All students could be and would be included by simply holding parent banquets. The students understood, and I knew that often there were those in my audience who identified with my remarks. On several occasions, the anti was given a hard time by a student when she brought the issue up. Consequently, she began accusing me of twisting things. But I will take the assessment of one class that we spoke to on successive days. On the 3rd day, the teacher had 2 questions. First, who was the better speaker? And the class chose the anti. And I will agree, she was slick, but a slackly clone. But then the teacher asked who came across as the most honest, and the class chose me. I consider this high praise because I would rather be known for my integrity than a dissembling tongue. Now, when I first became active working for the ERA, I was very naive. I knew about sexism and male chauvinism, but I did not know how far back these evils reached historically, nor how entrenched they were in society. I certainly didn't know how difficult it would be to make equality of rights under the law a reality. My role has been to educate the public on the benefits of constitutional equality and debunk misinformation in order to gain and maintain public support. Michigan was fortunate to have bipartisan support for the ERA in the legislature up until 1980, when Ronald Reagan was elected president. Both Governor William Milliken and First Lady Helen were staunch supporters. This played a crucial role in keeping Michigan a ratified state. Now, during this long struggle, if I ever start to feel discouraged, I channel Susan B. Anthony, who said shortly before her death in 1906, failure is impossible. I too believe that failure is impossible, but only if we continue to educate the public, agitate for equality, and elect supportive government officials. Then hold these officials accountable after the election. Thank you.
Laura, once again, thank you for your erudite thoughts and continued activism and brilliance. Your efforts have been instrumental in the future passage of the ERA, and thanks to you, it must happen soon. Now we'll be presenting Ellie Peterson, the mother of the moderates, portrayed by Nikki Edel, AAUW, Plymouth Canton. In 1914, Ellie Maud McMillan was born in the land of Lincoln, where people enter politics like they enter church. I was an extrovert and performer and sang at many events, even though I couldn't carry a tune. My parents insisted that I attend college, so off I went to William Woods in Missouri. Unfortunately, I was expelled for having one drink on New Year's Eve in 1932. My older sister rescued me and I went to live with her in Chicago and then enrolled in business school. I loved everything about it and became quite a successful secretary. In 1934, I met Pete Peterson, very much a man's man and quite a dude. We were married in 1935 and lived in Oak Park. I fell in love with the young Republicans more as a social thing. They were so much more fun than the Democrats. When Pete was offered a job with Standard Oil, we moved to Kalamazoo. In 1941, the war turned our world upside down. And over the next couple of years, our marriage dissolved, unfortunately. I became an overseas Red Cross volunteer for 2 years, spent time in England, France, and Germany, and finally returned home in 1945. I tried my hand at journalism, but just didn't have the self-discipline to be a writer. Pete and I remarried and moved to Charlotte, Michigan. In 1952, I attended my first Republican National Convention, and from then on, I was hooked. After doing a plethora of work for the Republican Party and living through multiple machinations, I became vice chairwoman of the Michigan Republican Party from 1961 to 1963. I worked diligently to help elect George Romney as governor of Michigan. I utilized my organizational skills, especially in enlisting the support of women voters. In 1964, I became a candidate for U.S. Senator from Michigan at the request of the governor. I traveled all over the state with very little money, but a lot of energy and outstanding organizational skills. I only missed 2 days on the campaign trail. I broke my toe when I was trying to put on my girdle. But in the end, I only garnered 33% of the vote. In 1965, I became the first woman to serve as chair of the Michigan Republican Party. I was a strong advocate for outreach, empowerment, fence mending, and organization. This was groundbreaking, but as you might have guessed, I was paid $6,000 less than the previous party chair. I was also the first woman in U.S. history to chair a Republican State Central Committee until 1969. I spent a lot of time in those years trying to broaden the base of the party, especially in Detroit, by reaching out to African Americans and other minorities. I also began to feel strongly about organizing the potential of women. Pete and I didn't have any children of our own, but I became mother to so many of my interns and volunteers. Among all of the issues of the early 70s and my commitment to a number of organizations, I was probably most devoted to the passage of the Equal Rights Amendment. In 1976, I was made co-chair, along with Liz Carpenter, a Democrat, of ERA America, an organization established to provide national focus for the ERA ratification campaign and to channel money and resources into the unratified states. At that time, ratification of the amendment was stalled, and one of the purposes of ERA America was to pump more money and enthusiasm into the ratification process. Although Liz and I meshed well and had positive impact, there were a lot of challenges with funds, communication, and organizational issues. There were also so many individual groups that had their own ways of doing things. However, during my 2 years as co-chair, I was a tireless speaker and advocate. In 1978, I resigned as co-chair, but continued my advocacy in any way that I thought useful. With failure of the amendment's passage, I then devoted myself to charitable organizational work. In 1976, I interrupted my retirement from Republican Party politics, but I accepted an interim basis as position of deputy chair of the Ford campaign. I resigned as deputy chairperson after the nominating convention, but continued on with People for Ford. Although I didn't continue with any formal role in politics, I did make my voice heard at times, especially during the Headley campaign, as I supported the Blanchard Griffiths ticket. I was still known as Mother, but now of the dissident Republican women. As I reflect on my life without regret, I tell myself I was there when the door was opened, and maybe that is enough for anyone's life, to be able to say you were there when the door was opened for someone else. My message to all of you, you are strong women. You have a voice. Continue to make your voices heard. Thank you, Ellie, for joining us today. It was our pleasure. And now we will be joined by Eileen Davis. As a lifelong advocate, Eileen Davis was one of the leaders that led a long movement to the successful ratification of the Equal Rights Amendment in Virginia, which was the final state needed. She stated, "This is for our daughters and granddaughters, and the people have gone before us. This is a victory for them all." She's also the mother of U.S. Representative Abigail Spanberger. She has been diligent for years, but also, and I'm sure she'll share with us, especially in the last several months. Eileen, thank you so much for joining us. We so appreciate your presence here.
Thank you so very much. I appreciate everybody. You know, what a great event. Let me begin by saying you all are so lucky to have Laura Callow be one of your Michigander sisters. I would like to tell you that she is the North Star for those of us nationally that are in this movement. I refer to her as the Queen Mother for us, and I want to be her when I grow up. So thank you, Laura. She inspires me. Whenever I'm having I really need a kick in the pants, I call her, and I'm reminded to just kind of put on my big girl shoes and get back to work. So it's an honor to share an event with you, Laura, always. So thank you. I was also watching the thing about Helen Milliken, and I'm reminded that we have a long bipartisan history. And I think that's important for us to remember, because we are in the middle of now a lot of problems that are coming from polarization. And I think that at the end of the day, we have to remind ourselves that bipartisanship is something that we're going to all agree on the things that are good. And I hope to return to that. And that has been a large part of what our messaging has been here in Virginia. But to that end, I will say to you that we are in Virginia at an inflection point. As you know, we were the last state to ratify. And I spent and then after we ratified, the archivist basically got a very political letter off from the legal Well, political. It wasn't an injunction, but it was a very strongly worded political letter, as has been described to me by top attorneys, not full of legal opinion, but full of political rhetoric that told him to stand down and not certify and publish. Now, the problem with that was I spent the first couple of months explaining to people what did it mean that we couldn't certify and publish. And then the election happened and we were all caught up in the refusal to certify and publish. So while public sentiment allowed that to go ahead and finish with all of the hoopla that came with it, I might add, but I don't now no longer thankfully have to explain what it means to say that we're in legal purgatory because we're waiting to be certified and published. But that's where we are. The 3 states of Nevada, Nevada, Illinois, and Virginia, excuse me. We are the 3 final states, and our ratification to certify and publish and finish this process has been thwarted by David Fierro saying, I can't do anything because this memo says I have to stand down. Now, of course, the Constitution refers to him as his duties as being ministerial, and for lack of a better word, a better description, he is a glorified librarian and has a role other than his ministerial role to certify and publish. But being that as it may, we are now tied up in court. What is going on is that we, the 3 states led by Virginia's own Attorney General, had filed a suit, which we were basically put off at the first level, and we have now given notice for an appeal, and an appeal is underway. We will be appealing. I'm telling you now, ladies, this is on its way to the Supreme Court. There's no doubt about it, which both terrifies me, but it also gives me hope, and I'll tell you why. All of the conservatives on the Supreme Court will tell you that they're originalists, and if they're originalists, they have to go ahead and say that we're right, because the originalists is you just can't pull a ratification deadline out of your behind and decide that suddenly this is the rules that we're following. If it's not in the Constitution, then you don't do it. And I would find anybody to find the word ratification deadline in Article 5 of the Constitution, because it isn't there. What it says is that states ratify, the archivist publishes, it's done, it's over, Johnny. That's what it says. So if you're an originalist, but we are going to the Supreme Court. There are a lot of amici briefs involved, of course, and of course my organization and myself are one of them, and I believe Michigan is also, Laura can qualify this, I think Michigan is also involved in some amicus activity. Many of the states are. What I wanted to just say to you that we are at an inflection point though here in Virginia, because we have an election this year. Virginia is only one of only 2 states that have elections every year, and we are in the middle of an election this year. All eyes are on Virginia, and for the people on this call, I want you to know the Equal Rights Amendment is on the ballot, because our Attorney General Mark Herring, and by the way, Michelle Kellen, who I believe you all met last year, who was our Deputy Solicitor General of Virginia, is now our Acting Solicitor General of Virginia. So we have, she's the one who wrote our case, wrote our brief, filed our lawsuit. She's the one that's carrying it. She's now Solicitor General, and this is wonderful for us. However, we're in the middle of a gubernatorial election, which of course includes the Attorney General. If we don't win, we're in trouble. I'm just putting it out there. We're in trouble, because the first thing they're going to do is take our appeal and put it on the back bench and just let it sit there and just be in purgatory until we get an Attorney General that cares again. So my call to you today is to tell you what we have done for this. Number one, when we ratified the Equal Rights Amendment in Virginia, we then turned to the 3 states, the 3 states, we all said, okay, what do we do now? So we morphed from VA Ratify ERA to voteequality.us, and take that email address, voteequality.us. And that is now a nationwide push for the national recognition of the Equal Rights Amendment. Because we're now, of course, trying to get Senate and House and court. And as Attorney General of Virginia, Mark Herring, said to me, Eileen, we have 2 courts in play here. We have the court, and we have the court of public opinion. My job is the court. Your job is the court of public opinion. So I'm telling you that what we're fighting to do with this appeal in Virginia affects everyone on this call. we need to get nationwide eyeballs on this. We need to pressure everybody to take this seriously. There is a big rally in DC on Women's Equality Day in front of the Supreme Court next week. There are things going on in the capital of Richmond, of which I am will be a part of. There are, as you know, events going on across the country. But I wanted to let you know that as the current Attorney General, Mark Herring, who is committed, this is one of his top priorities and remains his top priority. You know, he basically, he has to win. And Michelle Callan will be Solicitor General and she has to win. If we don't hold our Attorney General, we are going to be set back significantly. So I have to tell you that. So now our Vote Equality .us, we are in the middle of a Midwest tour right now. And I wanted to share with you, we are not going to Michigan, but we are going to St. Paul, Minnesota, Chicago, Illinois, Fargo, North Dakota, East Grand, Minnesota, North Dakota, South Dakota, Bismarck, Minnesota, St. Paul, Kansas City, Overland, Kansas, and right now we are in Oakland Park, Kansas. Oh, no, I'm sorry. This is August. No, we are driving to Des Moines, Iowa right now. And we are, you can see our vote getter bus on voteequality.us. We call it the RBV, the Ruthless Vote Getter, RVG, the Ruthless Vote Getter. It's an homage, of course, to RVG. Oh, I'm sorry. So we're out there now. We're not planning on coming to Michigan, but only because the schedule doesn't. We already did a South tour where we went through the South, but we are looking to do a Northwest tour. So if anybody on this call wants to be part of helping us coordinate that, we'd love to hear from you, because obviously what we need are people on the ground to tell us where to go and, you know, get us permission to pull into a parking lot and do what we do. We sent our Ruthless Vote Getter to Georgia and went around and made the Equal Rights Amendment a very important part of that election. And voteequality.us supports candidates that support the Equal Rights Amendment. That tends to, in today's political climate, that tends to fall along political lines. But we sent out candidate surveys. Will you support? Will you vote for? Do you support? Have you supported? And that's how we score candidates, strictly on vote equality. So it's a vote equality campaign. I'm ready for questions. Does anybody have any questions? I know it's a lot. I talk fast. I'm originally from New Jersey.
Feel free to put your questions in the chat box.
Oh, okay. Let me see if I can read them. Do you want to read them to me? Okay, I don't see any. Am I doing it right? Or
we don't have any yet. We don't have any yet.
I'm wondering though, this was a question from before. What are the current biggest obstacles to the ERA getting in the Constitution?
The fact that it's not certified and published. And the reason that it's not certified and published is, number one, we first of all, we don't have the full complement in the in Merrick Garland's office. Merrick Garland is still waiting to finish placing the person who will actually be tasked with moving us forward. So to some degree, we're holding we're keeping our foot off the gas because we aren't up to full complement. In terms of, there has been a lot of slow walking with getting people on board to getting Senate confirmations. So that's part of it. So, you know, timing is everything. The other part of it is the conversation that removing the deadline would make it a lot easier, because it removes one of the significant, and the Senate has to remove the deadline. And then and that would remove one of the things that the anti-ERA people are saying in court. You know, there's that old saying, if you're right, you argue the law. And if you can't argue the law, you bang on the table. They know they can't defend being against equality. So they're trying to come up with all this minutia of law. Oh, of course we believe in equality, but we can't do it because X, Y, Z. And then they throw all this little, and then once you unpack why the ratification deadline doesn't matter, then they pivot over to the Office of Legal Counsel sending out, I've heard some people miscall it an injunction. It was not an injunction. It was a poorly worded political warning letter. It's basically saying to Fierro, don't do this. And, he frankly, David Fierro could go ahead and publish and certify, and because there's nothing to stop it. But of course, like, he's probably worried about his job or whatever, or feels that he can't go against what the the Office of Legal Counsel told him, and is waiting for another letter to tell him to stand down. Now, we have asked them to release a new letter that says that you can ignore the last letter, but again, without the person in the job in the same position that wrote the last letter, we can't unring that bell either. You see what I'm saying? They kind of have us in a little bit of a legal hogtie. Part of it is frustrating in that we have to be patient, and timing is everything. But on the other hand, they have set us up in a way where, we're sort of in a cage, and over here there's this barrier, and over here there's this barrier, and we are just kind of like we're pivoting as we fight this legal boxing match of what is the next blow we're going to throw. But it's very strategic and it's very frustrating. But again, we've been doing this for 101 years. So, I don't know why they think we're going to stop, because we're not. Personally, I'm the most stubborn human being on the planet other than Ms. Callow. So the thing is that we are just kind of like responding, we're sort of like we're playing legal ping pong here. They throw a ball at us, we lob it back. They throw a ball at us, they lob it back. And they've tried everything. They've thrown all these things at us that we've been unpacking. We are moving forward, but what we need is the court of public opinion to get on our side. That's what we need. And the other thing is, which is part of a larger conversation, is that if we could get a majority vote in the Senate, we could remove the deadline. So, and there's been some conversation that it really isn't bound up in the filibuster. I just had a conversation with somebody the other day who said we could do it with a 52 vote. We could do it. But then I've been, that seems to be also another like legal, oh no, this has to be a 60 vote threshold. And then other legal people are going, oh no, this could be part of a resolution bill and it could go in on 52. So there's the legal beagles are out there trying to figure out what is the obstacle course? Do we turn right? Do we turn left? Do we go up? Do we go down? So it's the hardest question for me to ever answer is, why is it this hard? I can't answer that. I can't. And I don't think anybody on here can. We're all frustrated by the fact that this is ridiculous. But it is. And we're going to press on, and we will win eventually. And as I promised Laura Callow, we will get this done. It's been long enough, and to the Queen Mother of our movement, we are resolved and resolute. So we will continue. Any other questions?
Eileen, yes, we have one more question for you.
Yes, ma'am.
Quick question. What court is the archivist challenge in right now?
It went through the state Supreme Court, and it is now on its way to, went to the first level of federal court. It is now going to the second level of federal court. So we are 2 steps from the Supreme Court. So we are in our first appeal right now. We are in our first appeal.
Eileen, thank you so much. Your efforts have produced exceptional results, and we appreciate your fervor and your determination. And so grateful for your dedication to pass the 28th Amendment to solidify the rights of women in the Constitution. And I am so glad that you are continuing to be stubborn, and I cannot wait until you are here next year with us face to face.
The one more thing I want to say is also, when you read the amendment, it says the amendment shall take place 2 years from ratification. 2 years is January. So that opens up a whole new avenue for us in January, because technically the idea that they can't thwart ratification doesn't become illegal until January. They are now out of compliance with the constitutional amendment that says the amendment shall take place 2 years from ratification. So this January, all legal hell is going to break loose if we haven't had any movement. We're going to have a whole new avenue. So buckle your seatbelt, ladies. It's going to be a bumpy ride. So that's where we are. So if you go on votequality.us, it's all there. Our site is vetted by attorneys. Everything on there is not opinion. It is legally supported facts. So if you really want to learn this issue, we're very proud of how easy it is to understand. The FAQ page, if you go to nothing else, will give you all the different talking points, everything from topless women to every ridiculous anti-argument that's ever been given. And it gets longer every year because they keep running at it. Every time we unpack one nonsensical argument, they come up with another. So even if you just read the FAQs, for when somebody hits you with some ridiculous statement, like what Laura was recounting, you'll be ready for them with a quick 1-paragraph response that will, shut them down pretty quickly. So thank you. But yes, wait for January's 2-year anniversary, because then the law will be out of compliance with the Constitution. And that's going to be a whole nother level of fun. But we need to win this election, because if we don't, Virginia's going to be we're not going to be positioned to fight, because our AG, if we don't have the IG that we should have, and to fight this, we are going to be out of position to fight with any strength. We won't have our Solicitor General that we have now. So that's important. So I'm just putting it out there. You know anybody in Virginia? Tell them how important this is.
I mean,
Okay?
thanks again. We're so
Thank
glad
you.
you were with us today.
Thank you.
And now, before we end our program, we are presenting Martha Grivitz, mother of the ERA, portrayed by Sharon Bella-Bradich, AAUW Plymouth Canton.
Good afternoon and welcome to all of you. My name is Martha Griffiths, and I was born Martha Wright on January 29, 1912 in Pierce City, Missouri. I was one of 2 children raised by Charles, a letter carrier, and Nell, my mother. When I graduated from Pierce City High School in 1930, my mother realized that without an education, I would eventually be dependent on my future husband. So my mother took on extra jobs to pay for my college tuition. It was my mother's foresight and my paternal grandmother's struggle to raise 3 children after the death of my grandfather that inspired me to pursue equal rights for women. I ultimately attended the University of Missouri at Columbia and earned an AB in political science in 1934. It was there that I met and married Hicks G. Griffiths, a future Michigan Democratic Party chairman. We both studied law at the University of Michigan, and I worked on the staff of the Michigan Law Review. I graduated with an LLB in 1940 and was admitted to the bar the next year. We were the first married couple to graduate from that law school. My first job was working in the American Automobile Insurance Association in Detroit. Then in 1946, I opened my own law practice, and my husband Hicks joined a few months later. Hicks encouraged me to make a foray into Democratic politics in 1946 and run for a seat in the Michigan legislature. I won election to the state legislature in 1948 and 1950, and Hicks and I engineered the Michigan Democratic Club. In 1952, I captured the Democratic nomination for a seat in the US Congress. I lost, but was then elected as a judge and garnered some name recognition. It was an unusual experience to assist for 4 years in making the laws of the state and then sit as a judge of those people breaking the laws. In 1954, I mounted another bid for the Detroit seat in the US House. At that time, I did a district-wide tour by house trailer and met tens of thousands of voters, served all of them refreshments as well. I won without organized labor or the support of the Democratic Party that time. And then I won 9 more times, never seriously challenged again. In Congress, I became most interested in issues that affected women, and I made it a goal to change laws that were unfair to them. I was outraged to discover that when a man who was covered by Social Security died, his dependent children received benefits. But when a woman who was covered died, her children received nothing. There were a number of disparities that I worked to eliminate, and I ultimately succeeded. In 1964, I began working to add a ban on sex discrimination to the Civil Rights Act. I did a lot to frame the Sex Discrimination Amendment to Title VII of this act. I said to my male counterparts that a vote against this amendment by a man is a vote against his wife or his widow or his daughter or his sister. The amendment passed. Known as the mother of the ERA, I was pivotal in bringing the Equal Rights Amendment to a vote and eventually steering it to successful passage in the House. I originally thought that the way to secure women's rights was to bring a case before the Supreme Court, But eventually I came to believe that a constitutional amendment was the only way to success. However, before that, every year since 1955, I introduced the ERA legislation only to see it die in the Judiciary Committee. In 1970, I was finally able to get the bill kicked out of committee, and the House passed the ERA by a vote of 352 to 15. However, the House and Senate could not work out their differences, and I began the process again. In 1971, the amendment cleared the House and was approved by the Senate in 1972. However, the ERA was ratified by only 35 of the requisite 38 states and never has become a part of the Constitution, as all of you are well aware. Despite the amendment's failure, my recognition did soar after all of my work on the ERA. In 1982, I became the Michigan's first elected lieutenant governor with James Blanchard. We were elected for a second term, but he dropped me for the third term because of my age. Ridiculous, I said. The biggest problem in politics is that you help some SOB get what he wants, and then he throws you off the train. Guess who lost that election? I was known as a woman who broke many barriers and also as one of America's leading crusaders for women's rights and instrumental in leveling the gender playing field. So many of you are committed to this effort as well. It has been far too long, so continue this fight with fervor. The time for passage is now.
Thank you so much, Martha Griffiths, for joining us today. And many thanks to all of you for joining us today. I appreciate it on another fine summer day. Kudos to our exceptional speakers and also to Sharon and Helene, who honored prominent Michigan women. We've had an opportunity to pay tribute to our esteemed foremothers and celebrate the passage of the 19th Amendment. We've also had the opportunity to be inspired to redouble our efforts to make sure that the ERA is passed now. Failure is not an option. Next August, when we gather again to celebrate Women's Equality Day, I will keep my 2019 promise of champagne all around to finally toast to the 28th Amendment becoming part of our Constitution. Let us keep the faith and forge ahead with renewed efforts to bring this to fruition. Thank you again for coming. Take good care until we meet again.